The annual report is your second one. What is your kind of takeaway regarding the success of the association in 2019?
Well, I would always judge things, John, by the championships, by the games, by the matches themselves. And one little barometer, that is the number of people going to games. So over the course of 2019, we saw 1.5 million people attended inter-county matches, both football and hurling. And I think that in itself is a testament to the popularity of the two games.
The matches themselves, we even saw like 3 million out of the Dublin GAA replay. It just shows how saturated the country was with such an important game, and the popularity of it really captured the imagination of the public.
It's funny, I do it myself. Sometimes you make the mistake of characterising the entire year by how it finishes up and whether the final is a good game or whether it's a poor game. And I think the two finals that we ended up with in football terms this year were absolutely fantastic. But that's not to say that the rest of the football year wasn't good as well. I thought the standard of football throughout the summer and throughout the leagues, in fact, was really, really good. You'll remember over the course of previous years, there was maybe a little bit of discord and people maybe voicing negative sentiments about football, which gave rise to some of the rules stuff that we talked about earlier this morning. The championship this year belied that. It was a fantastic football championship, and hurling likewise too, even though the makeup of the final was very different from what we've seen in previous years. It was a return to a traditional final, two traditional powers, but two fantastic championships and a great summer and a really, really good year, John.
When we're looking at the football rules, a lot of change with the sin bin and the advance mark and that kind of thing. You're quite robust in your defence of the changes in the rules in your report today.
Well, I'm more robust, John, about the process. So I'm careful enough. I'm always careful enough not to be too outspoken in terms of the specific rules themselves. I think where we ended up was a good place. If you think of, we had, there were half a dozen or more potential changes that were proposed. I think people might have felt that was going a little bit too far and that football didn't need to be changed to that degree. And that was borne out in what we ended up with. We ended up with a small number of changes, and I think the one that people thought was going to be most far-reaching was the mark, the one that people were nervous about and thought it might, change the game in a negative way and make a two-stop start. Certainly the matches I've seen now over the course of the last couple of weeks, there haven't been an awful lot of marks. It hasn't changed the game recognisably, but where it has had an influence, I think it's been positive. But even apart from the actual changes to the rule themselves, I think the piece that I spoke about this morning and that I feel more strongly about is actually how it came about. That, we entrusted to a group of serious GAA people the job of looking at the game and seeing where it might need to be remedied a little bit or where it might need to be developed. They came back with some very, very good proposals. We road tested them for a long time. We gave everybody an opportunity to have a say. There was a really, really good debate about it. We refined them. Some of them we withdrew altogether. We played a trial. We trialled them throughout last year and we brought them in this year. And I think that process has stood us in good stead, and it's something that we can kind of learn from and use going forward.
So you think the advance mark's here to stay?
Look, no rule is here to stay necessarily, but I think it's working thus far. I'd always be cautious too about arriving at a definite conclusion after just 3 rounds into it being here as a permanent rule in the National League. I think it's working. I think it's had a positive impact. I don't think it has changed the game beyond all recognition, which I think is the fear people had.
Does the hurling championship need a sin bin? Does it need a black card?
I think there are elements of hurling that do need a little bit of attention, and the charge that probably could have been levelled against us in the past about football was maybe we didn't take action around the fringes of it as quickly as we should have, and we got to the point there where last year or the year before we were looking at 7 or 8 potential rule changes and people stopped to think, geez, this is going to have a serious impact on the game. Don't really want to fall into that with hurling. I think it's important that hurling is a great place. It's the hurling that we're seeing played today is the best there's ever been. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't improve upon it, or you don't owe maybe a duty of care to players to make sure that, for example, cynical play is minimised and so on. So I think it's a good time to have the debate. I think it's a good time to have the argument. There'll be lots of views one way or the other. We're going to vote on it here in 2 or 3 weeks' time at Congress time. I hope it's well informed. I hope it's an open and a fair debate. That's all you can ask for.
Clonliffe College, this seems like a good deal for the GA, the deal you've done with Clonliffe College. What's it going to do regarding benefiting the association regarding games?
Well, I think what it does, look, the financial part of it is always secondary of anything that we do in this place. But it's an unfortunate consequence of the world that we live in, that we need to generate funds in order to further all the stuff that we're more interested in. You heard this morning, Jeremy Ryan talking about the scale of some of the projects that are ahead of us in terms of county grounds and so on. And there's been a real change in the last 10 years, 5 years. The cost of doing these things it's almost beyond the reach of what we can generate from our just day-to-day taking people through the turnstile. So you need to think a little bit differently about how you can safeguard the association for the future in terms of capital projects. The Clonliffe project is one such way of doing that. In broad terms, what we've done is we've acquired the grounds of Clonliffe College. We will we're in the throes of disposing of portions of that for development. We'll retain, and the disposals will, by and large, will fund the acquisition costs. We'll retain some assets, we'll retain some pitches, we'll retain some pieces of land. We plan to build a hotel on one such site, and that will generate an income for the association for the foreseeable future. If you think about it, the hotel that we have at the moment across Jones's Road, that contributes a 7-figure rent into the association every year. You'll have seen that in the distribution from the stadium back into the GAA, and that then is distributed on the same basis as all the other funds that we receive throughout the year, John. That's the rationale for it.
Tier 2 Championship, as it's called. How is this going to be promoted to really make it vivid in the people's imagination?
Well, I'm very conscious of, do you remember the last time we embarked upon something like that?
The Tommy Murphy Cup.
Yeah. When was that? That's maybe 15 years ago or so now at this stage. The idea at the time was a good one, and I think the idea this time is a good one. But the job for us is to make sure that it captures the imagination of players, of patrons, of yourselves, of the media. So there will be a concerted marketing and promotion campaign. There will be resources put behind it. We've talked about things like all-star schemes for the players. We've talked about things like choice of venues and timing of matches. We've talked about things like staging the finals at Croke Park in conjunction with games in the Sam Maguire Championship and so on. So everything that we can do to make the thing attractive and to make the thing a vibrant competition in its own right, not as a substitute for something else, we'll be doing, John.
Like over the winter, we saw a lot of kind of drain of players, maybe just saying, you know what, I'm not going to put in the time. Is it worth it? Do you think in a year's time a Tier 2 competition maybe have a better impact on players saying, this was actually great, this was something I could strive for, Croke Park finals, a trophy in the end of it?
I do hope so. I mean, there's a number of counties for whom ambitions at a provincial championship are maybe a bit of a stretch, and ambitions at winning an All-Ireland certainly are. So the idea is it's player related first and foremost, John, to be honest about it. And if it's something that isn't attractive to players, then we need to change it so that it becomes attractive to players. All the other stuff that I talk about in terms of media and in terms of supporters and so on, that's kind of secondary. If the players aren't bought into it, then it's not going to work.
Pairc, that was in your report today. What are the lessons that can be learned from Pairc and the development of it, redevelopment of it, with the 20 million debt?
Well, the first one I mentioned it a minute ago, just the sheer scale of projects that we have to undertake now. So the next 2 or 3 projects that we undertake, we'll have to be just very, very conscious that we deliver them on time and that we deliver them on budget and so on. The one thing, I mean, I mentioned Pairc in my report today, just in the spirit of setting out definitively what the overall picture is, because it's kind of fragmented through various sets of accounts around the association. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to set it out definitively. And I don't mean to do that in a negative context, because it's the biggest and best a development project that we've undertaken in the association for the last 30-40 years, and it will be an asset for Cork, GAA and for all of us for the next 30 or 40 years. So it's a place to be hugely proud of. The challenges that are ahead, to be fair about it, they're not much different from the challenges that would apply to any county ground, except they're on a slightly larger scale. I mean, in general, we don't anywhere build a county ground or a stadium that doesn't have debt associated with it, John. That, unfortunately, that's the reality. That applies everywhere. There is going to be a challenge ahead with financing and funding the debt on the stadium, but Cork is a serious GAA county, and I have no doubt in the world that they'll be able to do that.
So you don't see it as a white elephant with maybe the lack of high-profile games there on a regular basis throughout the year?
As I said, that will be there, that stadium will be there, and there'll be patrons walking through the turnstiles at Pairc and impressed by that facility for the next 30, 40 years. Absolutely not a white elephant, absolutely not.
Regarding governance in general terms, Tom, the lessons that can be learned from Mayo and Galway, obviously these stories got in the media over the last few months, with Mayo with the benefactor and high court proceedings and all this kind of thing, and then Galway with the accounts. Do the GAA, have you got any central role planned for tightening up the way county boards do their business financially?
We have plenty of things in place already, actually, John, in terms of supporting the county boards, both directly financially and also in terms of the structures that they use. I won't comment a whole lot on those two particular cases, other than to say, look at and it's related to what we were chatting about earlier on. More and more counties are dependent on funding outside of what we here can provide, purely because of the scale of the cost of fielding county teams. So it's a fact of life that counties do need sponsorship, and they do need fundraising, and they do need partnerships, and it's just important that any of us, GAA-wise, whether it be in a club or a county or here ourselves, when we're embarking upon an arrangement like that, just to set it out clearly to all concerned what the relative responsibilities, obligations, duties of all the parties are beforehand. And I think that's something that we will be trying to just reinforce to counties over the course of 2020.
And you also put in your report about the amount spent on county teams. That's something you'd like maybe just to be reined in a bit?
Yeah, we haven't cracked that. There was a period 3 or 4 years ago when that cost appeared to be, if not coming down, at least appeared to be capped. It's increasing again, and it's not really sustainable. I mean, the sheer amount of pressure that it puts on counties financially is unsustainable, and the pressure it puts on county officers individually as volunteers to both bring in that funding, to make sure that funding is deployed to the best effect within counties. The sheer amount of stress, hassle, pressure that it puts on all of us is not sustainable. We need to address that.
And any kind of solutions you have in mind? Is there a cap? Is that fair? Or is that like feasible?
I don't even know how it would work. But I think the one definite thing that we need to do is think about things a bit differently from how we've done it up to now. So if you look at what it is that drives those costs, it's the length of the season, perhaps. It's the size of panels. It's the proliferation of competitions. It's all manner of things. So it's not as simple as just pointing at one thing and saying fix it. And clearly we here will have a role in trying to find a solution to that as well, John.
There's a lot of talk in Irish sporting discourse about governance at the moment. We had the issues with the FAI. I think there's a very transparent, clear message from the GAA today about where the money's going, where the money's spent, like that is all put back into the association. Do you think, or do you intend to publish the salaries of senior staff at the GAA, Tom?
Well, we have actually done that, John. If you have a look through the accounts, you'll see we didn't up to now. We never had any kind of disclosure like that in our accounts before, and certainly we never referred to individuals or anything like that. This year, what we've done is we have identified and disclosed in aggregate the salaries of, I suppose, what you would call the senior management group. So that's a bit of a departure for us. But again, we haven't mentioned individuals. But look, what we've got in the accounts there, I think it's in excess of what we would be required to provide in terms of accounting standards and in terms of the law and so on, all those things. We're conscious of those standards. We're conscious of preparing accounts that are meaningful to users, and they are actually able to get a good handle on what it costs to run the association. So we have expanded on our disclosures this year.
You enjoying the job, Tom? What's your hope for 2020 in Gaelic Games?
Big thing for 2020, I would love to see the fixtures issue making progress. I think the amount of work that went into that over the course of the last 3 to 6 months was phenomenal, and I think if we can arrive at some really good changes arising out of that piece of work towards the end of the year, I think that'll be good. And as always, my hope for the year is good matches.
As we all do, even for Carlo. Even for Carlo. Do you have, or does John have, any skin in the game or view on, this radical change that will come in with football, possibly with the 4/8s or with the flipping the league and the championship next year?
There are all number of arguments and counter arguments. I suppose. I would have my own view. I think as an organisation we get characterised as being quite conservative, and we get characterised as being slow moving. I think those things are all, certainly from where I'm sitting anyway, that's not the case. There's an awful lot of change going on at the moment. I think there probably is a bit of a mood out there for change, and certainly wouldn't be afraid of it at all. As regards what shape specifically that should take, I'm kind of conscious of not looking to influence the thing one way too much or another, but suffice to say, I think a change would be a good thing. I think change is necessary. The more important thing from my perspective, where I'm sitting, is that it's done properly. That everybody that has a view on the thing has a chance to express that view, that all of those views are taken on board when we eventually arrive at a decision. So what we're going to do, once Congress is over, we'll embark upon a series of little roadshows around the country. We have 8 of them planned on a regional basis, and we'll do more if we need to then thereafter, specifically for county officers and for club officers, club representatives, to set out to them what the options are. And we'll be quite careful not to espouse one over the other. We have to be. We just explain to people what a new structure would look like, what the implications would be, what the knock-on effects would be in each case, and allow people to reach an informed judgment. To me, it's the process and how we do it is the important part.
Two things that kind of, I love the GAA, I love the games, that kind of grind my gears a bit, are the 2 weeks between the hurling and football finals. Is that something that maybe the September tradition of finals that could be revisited, do you think?
You mean in terms of reinstating that little bit of a gap?
Yeah.
Certainly, I know that the people working in here would be quite happy if that was the case. But I'd be as traditional as the next person, and we all used to love All-Ireland finals in September and all that. But I think such is the momentum for change in terms of freeing up space, club fixture-wise, that of necessity it involves compromise. And if we're going to reach a better fixtures picture for the club player, there are things that we will have to relinquish when it comes to the inter-county calendar. I think that has sailed, that one, John. I don't think that's going to change back.
Also, when Dublin win 5 in a row, and I tweet about Dublin doing great guns with football, I get these people sending me photos of the amount of money that goes to Dublin GAA through coaching and development over a decade. Is that fair? Are people being fair when they do that? Because I just think Dublin's got the biggest population, over 1 million people, and surely the money's been used for proper facilities in Dublin, proper coaching in Dublin.
I think it's being well used. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily draw a correlation, or a direct correlation anyway, between that funding and the fortunes of the senior intercounty football or hurling team, really. I mean, that funding is, for the most part, well, actually exclusively, really, it's for coaching for children at primary schools level. So what is geared at is participation and encouraging kids to take up the game, and it's almost kind of, it's schools based rather than club based to a large degree. And I think it's a pity that it becomes something of content. I think it's something that we should be proud of, the amount of funding that we're putting into Gaelic games all over the country, not just in Dublin. You'll have seen there this morning, we tried to maybe present a picture of funding around the rest of the country and how things have evolved in the course of the last 3 or 4 years. So in actual fact, the funding going to Dublin, or that scheme that you have mentioned, has dropped a little bit, dropped maybe 10-15%. Whereas all over the rest of the country it has grown, and in some places it has grown exponentially, in places like Belfast and in the rest of Leinster and so on. So I think it's something that the association should be proud of, and if we get to the stage where hopefully we do have additional resources to deploy in the future, coaching and participation for kids, that's where it will be spent.
The GPA, are you close to an agreement? It seems to be the case from the Commissariat side.
We're working hard, and to their credit, they're working hard on arriving at an accommodation that will put both organisations on a good, sound footing for the years ahead. So I'm optimistic that we'll conclude that before too long.
Well, Tom, we much appreciate your time and giving the robust answers that you did, and the very best of luck for 2020, and hopefully the hurling and football championships will be as exciting as they have been the last few years, with novel counties, with history made, with Limerick, with Galway, with Dublin's 5 in a row.